And our next guest, who's joining us by video link, was originally slated down, and I have to clear it with him if he's happy to talk about developments in Wellington. We were going to talk about 4 years terms, and we'll still get into that. But the Mayor of Nelson, Nick Smith. Nick, would you be happy to have a discussion about, in broad terms, about what's gone down in Welly over the last 12, 14 hours?
Yeah, happy as Larry. Just as you please.
All right.
Sure.
Very good. Well, Nick Smith, Mayor of Nelson, welcome to the program. First, could I ask you, if you were ever, heaven forfend, in a position where the government says you are making such a hash of being Nelson, or Nelson Council is so dysfunctional, we're going to send in an observer, would you stay on as Mayor? What would go through your head in that situation?
Well, the key thing you'd need to ask is what's best for your community. I'm a bit old-fashioned in that when you stand for election, you commit yourself to doing that term. It would depend very much on the circumstances that arose. You know, you've had equivalent sort of interventions in Tauranga when I was Minister for the Environment. Chose to dismiss the council at Environment Canterbury after a report showed that they were very dysfunctional. So I do think you need to be quite pragmatic about those sort of interventions. And Sean, on one of those, it says, regardless of what system you might have, it will never be perfect. And I was actually involved as Minister in introducing a wider range of interventions that ministers
right, and that was the other thing. An observer is hardly like taking a sword to democracy, is it? It's a pretty gentle step to try and get things back on track, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the Minister of Local Government's made a shot across their bow and said, hey guys, you're not doing well for the capital and need to do something to try and pull your act together. So I think it's proportionate to the scale of problems at Wellington, albeit they run deep. You know, the issues around the water at the Wellington City Council go back 20 years, where there has been huge emphasis on whether it's building stadiums and waterfront, very visual stuff that looks very sexy, and the sort of the pipes under the ground, boring stuff has been neglected by multiple councils. And I do feel a little sorry for Mayor Turifan, who has inherited a massive problem around water. I also think the problem with Wellington Water goes beyond just the elected members. There's a major structural deficiency in the way in which Wellington Water is structured. It makes absolute sense that you've got a number of local authorities from the two Hutt Valley councils, Wellington and the like, having a water entity across them. The problem is that entity, Wellington Water, has no direct income of its own. It can only go to the begging bowl of those councils and the amount of money that is there. And every council and organisation in local government's got that pressure. How much do we charge and what services you get? That structural deficiency has said that the councils have been able to shortchange the amount that they spend on water over a very long period, and they'll then just simply say, oh, that's a hopeless bunch of people that are running Wellington Water, nothing to do with me as mayor or my council. Right. And that structural deficiency is going to have to be addressed if Wellington is going to get on top of it.
And an observer simply doesn't have the remit or the power to do that. So that issue isn't addressed by this move.
Oh, yes, it is. I think the bigger problem, and I do see it across local government, I started actually as a councillor, as a very young person in Rangiora over 40 years ago, and slightly guilty of it myself, and still see it today, and that is young people that are ambitious and all sorts of people who may not necessarily make it to Parliament, get distracted by standing on council and want to run a whole lot of issues, whether they be climate change, or when I was a young person, the nuclear issue was very big in the 1980s, that are really the preserve of central government, but couldn't get elected there, and so get distracted from the core business that is local authorities.
Yeah. And that'd be my other observation here. Part of the problem with Wellington, Nick, has been it has become a forum for national political battles within the council. And I think we've had a pretty good tradition in New Zealand of national politics staying out of local body politics. So you were talking about local issues. It would seem to me Wellington, for a whole lot of specific reasons, not least of which it's the capital and one of the most liberal electorates or volatile places in the country for political sort of rhetoric, that seems to me to have damaged the council as well, or its ability to operate well as a council.
I think it's a problem at more than just Wellington, but you're absolutely right. It really comes to the fore in Wellington that issues like actually making sure your sewage pipes, your water pipes, making sure that your roading network are pretty boring engineering related issues. And yet if you ask around the council table, the amount of either time or expertise that's put into 75% of what councils do just don't make the priority in the forum or the type of people that are elected. And that has been exacerbated in Wellington, but is common across the country.
Okay. Well, one thing some would say is we've got an election next year in Wellington and democracy can provide a correction to the problems we're undergoing. Would you advocate, though, that at a local government and national government level, we should have less democracy by extending terms to 4 years?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question, Sean, about what is the right amount of democracy to be effective. And if you take a bit more than just a local New Zealand perspective and take an international perspective, it is my view that you can have so many elections so often that people just don't give a stuff and nobody participates. And one of the biggest problems that I'm quite focused on in local government is that we've seen the level of participation over the last 30 years drop from about 58% of people participating right down to 40%. Even in June, in Tauranga, where you had a dysfunctional council and a fresh new election, you only got 39% of people.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's very low turnout. Yeah.
So are they related? Well, my view is, and the days of we used to have elections for our power boards, elections for
the dog catcher.
Absolutely, the rabbit board and all those things. I have a view that for democracy to function, you need a small number of them and make sure that they're very professionally run, they have got a high profile and get people participating. In the work we've done about why do people not vote in local elections, part of it is the problem around the post, because I'm sorry, snail mail is dead.
Yep, absolutely.
And with all our councils running our elections on a postal system, postal volumes have declined by 80%. Look, we have got in tens, if not hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders who either don't have a mailbox or never check the mailbox. Yep. And so I think that's a problem. But then on top of that, Sean, is a comment in many of the surveys that have been done about why people haven't bothered to vote, is they look at the big range of candidates, they've got no idea what they stand for and have difficulty if you read what they call the candidate's profile.
Oh, yeah.
They're all motherhood and apple pie. They give you no information, and so you've got a problem there as well. So I'm of a view that a longer term of 4 years, but having a high level of profile and a more professionally run elections would actually serve our democracy better.
God, that would have meant we'd wait another year to vote in Wellington, Nick. I'm not sure we could put up with that.